Reality is pornography is creating an unrealistic expectation on every level of what sexuality and healthy sexuality is. So if we just normalize the fact that sex is a beautiful thing, it's a God-designed dynamic, and unfortunately, many of us have had a really icky example on both like extreme purity culture or the other side of abuse, sexual abuse. We've had icky examples. But there is a good place for it. And pornography is portraying something that is not realistic to sustain. It'd be like me trying to, run like an Olympian sprinter and to be able to think that I can do that when I am not made that way. The level of lifestyle and intensity to live that way on an ongoing basis, it's just unrealistic.
Welcome to the Living Wholehearted Podcast, helping leaders live with integrity.
Well, we're back and we're talking about pornography. We're going to talk about the impact of pornography in our lives. We're going to talk about maybe outside of just moral reasons for not doing it, but actually some of the neuroscience and the impact on relationships. And just to give you more a holistic perspective on why not to use pornography. And if you're struggling with pornography or love someone who's struggling, maybe even how to talk to your kids about it. Here we go. We're diving in. You ready?
Yep. Just like we always do. We're no topic is off the table here. We're trying to turn towards things that really are impacting real lives. And we're right there with you.
Yeah. Okay. Listen up. It's a heavy topic. And honestly, I've spent more years probably in the trenches talking about pornography, sex addiction, because in marriage counseling, I started out with this naive kind of idea that I was going to help couples with communication. And so a couple would come in and they'd be like, we want to grow closer. We have a hard time talking and we need to work on things, and I would work on the basics of our marriage tools that we want to offer every marriage, and every marriage needs to learn. And then somewhere along the way, I'd be like, it feels like there's a hole in the boat. Like we're not going anywhere. We continue to keep spinning around or we're even sinking, and something's not right. So I started to tune in and realize that pornography is often that hole in the boat, that it is pulling energy away from not only the person using pornography, but the marriage relationship, their relationship with God. And it is creating a massive problem for the outcomes of what we're wanting in all of our life.
Also the relationships that are outside of the marriage and family, right? Friendships and all relationships will be impacted by people that are using and addicted to pornography. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're like ready to turn this podcast off because this has nothing to do with me, I want to say pause, wait. Because honestly, 1 in 3 pastors is struggling with pornography. 1 and 2 men in the congregation, 50%, are struggling with pornography. And of that percentage, there's another smaller percentage that are actually struggling with more sex addiction, which is a continuum. Pornography is a piece of sex addiction, but it isn't the whole piece.
And how about women?
And women more than ever before because of the introduction of the digital age in 2006 with the iPhone at our fingertips. Gen Z, women are struggling more with pornography than ever before. So it is something, whether it's your spouse, whether it's you, whether it's those in your wake of leadership, whether it's your children, it's something that you want to stay informed on and to be able to talk about without feeling uncomfortable. So this is a safe way to do it. Have a conversation with us. We're not asking you to speak back and to share anything at this point, but we are here. Our counseling team and our coaching team are here for sure. If this is an issue you're going to need support with along the way.
And you know that just from our experience, if you've tuned in before, that we're talking about all of these issues, and we're not singling out this issue over others as the most important or the greatest sin, or what have you. Hey, this is humanity, and we're bringing humanity right before us and before God in relationships. This is how we get healthy. We get healthy by talking and bringing our humanity into safe spaces where we can get help. And so hopefully today that you're thinking and feeling, Wow. Okay. That's a different take on this, perhaps. And we hope that it is in many ways. A grace-based approach here towards understanding our humanity properly. So,
okay. So I shared a little bit of my engagement around pornography and the work that I've had done the last 20 years. Where has it shown up in the work that you do or in your relationships along the way?
Yeah, well, just as a guy, I'm 47 today. So,
happy birthday!
No, it's not today, but yeah, at the airing of this podcast. And I was introduced. I talked to a lot of people in their journeys and stories about pornography, the introduction to it. I was introduced when I was playing soccer at a classic traveling soccer team as an elementary age kid. We stopped in for Slurpees at 7-Eleven, and some kid goes like this. He grabs the magazine that was accessible to kids at that time, and he goes, "Hey, look!" And he opened it up, and I'd never seen the naked woman before. And that was my introduction to pornography. And I wasn't searching for it, but it was hard to stop, to not search for it thereafter, right? So it's so many people have a common introduction. Now, that's just my beginning of my experience. It would resurface for me later on in young adulthood, adolescence, so late adolescence, young adulthood, in the advent of the internet. But TV really was actually the most accessible thing to me. And I struggled less with internet searches. I think maybe I was a little bit more worried or fearful that, records of searches could be found. So I didn't want to pursue that. But TV, soft porn is on TV all the time. And
especially today.
And then you have the advent of the DVR, which can slow things down and fast forward and all this stuff. And so I know what I'm saying isn't going to be surprising to people if they're honest with their experiences or their stories, but that was my introduction. And so I understand that it's just prevalent and it's everywhere. And I've had to learn some things along the way as to how to regulate that and the whys behind it and what it's doing and what are the needs, right? And what do the needs have to say? So I know we're going to get into some of that.
Yeah. And so, I mean, most men, if not 100%, have had some introduction at some level. In fact, the research says, and this has been true with the thousands of clients I've sat with over the years, about age 6 to age 11, girl or boy, you will be exposed to pornography of some sort. And this isn't soft pornography that we see in ordinary TV shows. This is more hardcore pornography, especially with the age of the digital world, kids having access on phones. Again, all us parents are like, well, not my kid, because we have all the filters. Yeah. The problem is you're going to have to put them in the woods, like with no people around and no technology around for them to never be exposed, because people expose people. And that's often what happens, like in Jeff's story, children showing other kids, or older siblings showing younger siblings. And so the shame, taking the shame out of the exposure to pornography is just honestly a part of living in this broken world. And I just want to start maybe with kind of breaking the idea of whether pornography can be existent at all in your life, because this is a common struggle if you're outside of the church, meaning you don't follow Jesus, you don't really have a moral ethic about it. What's the big deal? Is how most people think. Yeah. Like, it's just sexuality. It's a part of sexuality. What's the big deal? And in those cases, I'm often talking about what are you contributing to and the impact of pornography. So pornography addiction, it's not like taking a small sip of, I don't want to use an example of a substance but it's actually more like heroin. You can't just have one hit. You try a little bit of heroin and be like, oh, it's okay. I have heroin once a month. It's just not a thing. You're either a heroin addict or you're not. Pornography, you can't have small doses of it and not be affected by it. So it not only has effects on our brain, our sexuality, our sense of self. We're going to talk about the impact even on
our relationships,
or erectile dysfunction, depression, anxiety, just through the roof on the impact. But you're contributing to a greater systemic problem with sex trafficking. Yeah. It's actually a part of a greater systemic problem we have of taking advantage and using sex as a mean of power, abuse, and control. So it is not something that is anywhere good or helpful. And that is in the secular realm of research. Going to a more moral or looking at it from a biblical worldview, it's common in the church for people to say, well, we all struggle at some level, or once in a while I slip. And what we want to say to you, maybe it would be better coming from Jeff because of part of your story, but is to say you don't have to. And it's similar to me having a history of struggling with body image issues. It's not that I'm like, I love my body, I'm amazing. It's more of I am free of the battle that was engaging me, that it feels really normal for most women to be dieting and yo-yoing and focusing so much around what we eat and how we exercise and what we look like. I'm free of that. I want to say we can also be free of the pull of pornography and what it's going after if we understand what need we're trying to meet with this unhealthy coping strategy that's kind of dangerous. It's like heroin.
Yeah, and it is clinically proven to be as addictive as heroin. So we're not using that flippantly here. So that's just what we're talking about. And there's certain things that are less addictive, but there isn't any place really that we can think of and know of where the use of pornography would be contributing a positive aspect to the human life. The objectification of women and the systemic problem of sex trafficking is something that a lot of times people who are using pornography are not thinking about. But that when you start to think about that and you get underneath the surface, thinking critically and taking some time to look at this, it starts to change the beliefs that you may have about this and the behaviors that you have and the feelings that you have associated with it too. So, I would just say that, we hear also from couples. I've heard from couples many times that we use pornography to help with our sex life. That is not helping with your sex life. There's so many things about that. It's making more things difficult and biologically, like we're talking about.
Can we explain why?
Yeah, sure. That's a great one.
Do you want to or me?
Well, you start.
Okay, I'll start. The reality is pornography is creating an unrealistic expectation on every level of what sexuality and healthy sexuality is. So if we just normalize the fact that sex is a beautiful thing, it's a God-designed dynamic, and unfortunately, many of us have had a really icky example on both like extreme purity culture or the other side of abuse, sexual abuse. We've had icky examples. But there is a good place for it. And pornography is portraying something that is not realistic to sustain. It'd be like me trying to, run like an Olympian sprinter and to be able to think that I can do that when I am not made that way. The level of lifestyle and intensity to live that way on an ongoing basis, it's just unrealistic. And so if you think that's going to help your sex life, what you're doing is you're creating an identity around what you think you're supposed to be doing, what your spouse or your significant other is supposed to be doing, and this unrealistic expectation. And in the confidential counseling office, I have rarely heard a woman say that she really likes using pornography. And if she says she likes it, I guarantee you she has significant sexual abuse in her story. And she has been formed to shape to think that that is a main part of her identity and contribution to any intimate relationship. So that's my more holistic innovator kind of approach to it. What would you add in terms of why it's just not good for a relationship?
Yeah. Well, I reference this TED Talk a lot, actually, by a secular PhD. It's called The Great Porn Experiment. And he broke it down in such biological terms of what it's actually doing in the body when you're actually addicted to pornography. And it is like any addiction, the law of diminishing returns is prevalent, right? That means that you need to continue to increase the risk, the exposure to get the same dopamine hits, the chemical pleasure center released in our brain, to be able to satisfy that. And you just can't keep upping the ante. I mean, over and over again. And so that's where the argument is that it's creating more erectile dysfunction in males. And it's a leading contributor to this. Pornography is prevalent in the world. And that's why you're seeing commercial after commercial for ED and all of this stuff. It doesn't have to be that way. And of course, we're not minimizing somebody who medically has this, who isn't using pornography. So I want to be clear clear
Not a
about
direct
that and
correlation.
careful about that. But there is for many of we're seeing such a spike in ED, and you see that, and media is promoting all of these drugs to help people to have this experience differently, and there is a direct correlation biologically to the use of porn and ED. At the TED Talk, PhD uses in his great porn experiment.
Yeah, you can. We'll
discussion.
actually link to that in our show notes because I think it's worth watching. There are many spokespeople now because of the research coming out that again aren't proclaiming a moral view on pornography, but are saying the neuroscience and the impact is clear. The level of anxiety and depression for men. And women actually who are using pornography, it is a direct correlation that over time, your dopamine levels just won't hit. Same like heroin. They just won't hit the same levels. And so just normal life doesn't feel good anymore. Yeah.
And Russell Brand, whatever you think about Russell Brand, is an interesting person. He was on the circuit crying out to men, alert. You're stepping impotence, impotence. And this is the argument, right? That you don't want to be impotent. Stop using porn. And this is Russell Brand. And a few years ago, he was just speaking about this all the time and with great conviction.
Yeah.
And so there's clinical wisdom and worldly wisdom of kind of catching up to what we understand when we look at the gift of sex from a biblical worldview and how it's to be used.
Let's shift gears to talk specifically about those in the church and maybe people who are struggling and are like, I don't want this in my life, but I keep this going back. And I hope you hear the grace in the fact that this is not just a flippant decision. It is a hook, and you really do need help. So often the antidote in the church is accountability. Like just get an accountability, a partner, have some filters on your computer. So those are good behavioral modifications, and they're going to help you with deterrence on creating healthy habits. So if you don't want to go down the road of pornography, then create healthy habits around when you watch TV, who has access to all of your
it's part of the solution.
Media, and you have accountability places you're talking about it. But the truth is that if you want to look at pornography, you can have all the behavioral modifications in there. You're going to figure it out. There's a lot of other ways that are softer kind of hunting techniques that people will use to get the same need met, maybe without pornography. Going to the grocery store, watching a woman running down the highway in her exercise clothes. There's lots of other material out there. So the reality is thinking about what is going on underneath the issue. That was a Freudian slip. Okay. So the need and most
Freudian slip.
most of the time, it's the need to be emotionally connected, to be nurtured and intimately connected and not knowing how. So most of us who struggle with pornography, somewhere along the way, got exposed, and it met this like, oh, this feels good and it feels comforting, which sex, even in the Bible, says is to comfort. I think we see that with King David, and some of the reasons God maybe created sex is a part of a comfort. It's a stress reliever. It definitely relieves the body of intensity. So you can see how pornography would be a quick fix of stress relief, feeling a sense of dopamine pleasure without needing to do the work of relationship. And yet, if you didn't learn in your family of origin how to emotionally connect, how to be comforted and cared for, how to deal with your stress with people and in relationship apart from sex, pornography is a really clever way to do that. It just doesn't last, and it leaves you with a big wad of shame and a lot of side effects. So the undercurrent,
a hole in your boat.
A hole in your boat, exactly. So really coming back to it, the practice is real relationship.
Right.
Like how do I find comfort, care, a place to feel known and seen and loved here with God and with others in your marriage and your friendships? I would say that most men who struggle with pornography do not know how to have intimate relationships with their guy friends. They often lean into their wife, sex, and work.
Yeah.
But not knowing how to have emotional connection with other men is actually a part of the equation.
That might really be a light bulb going off for some of you right now, actually. You think, I've got buddies. Well, how close are you to them? How close have you let them into your life, right? And so we're not talking about just having buddies, right? We're talking about people that you would have closer relationships with, that know you and you know them, and you're talking about life and challenges, and you're able to emotionally connect. And if you are feeling like, wow, this is explaining something about why I've used porn, and how it's a shortcut that really never satisfies long term. And there's a connection here to a need that I have been just trying to get met that way, and keeping private and keeping it out of view from my wife, from my kids, from God, as if I could, and for trying to just do it less, even by white knuckling it, realizing that there's a direct correlation with actually how you can get that need met in healthier ways by having real relationships, which is that can be a scary thing as well.
It is a scary thing.
A good place to practice that, by the way, if you're realizing that this is part of your story, is in counseling, actually, where you can be honest about this with someone who is trained to understand that connection, and then to talk about what it looks like to form those kinds of healthier relationships that will give you healthy outlets. And you're going to start seeing that you're going to be more satisfied and more whole, and less inclined to go get that need met in that simple secret way, right? That really doesn't satisfy.
I love it. We had some great conversations in the past. We have other episodes where we talked with Jay Stringer, his book Unwanted. Years ago, we had a Dr. Carrie Sheffer on for those who have been in sexual betrayal, and the PTSD that comes and the trauma that comes when you are in a serial relationship where there's just constant pornography. I'm sorry. Will you forgive me? I won't do it again. Here we are again. And it keeps coming back around. So to the partner and the person who's struggling, get help. Take this seriously. Accountability and behavioral modifications are part of the equation, but there is something underneath that you really have to get to, and that can take some time and take a professional. And so our Living Wholehearted counseling team is here. You can go to livingwholehearted.com and you can reach out to one of our counselors specifically. But also, if you're a leader and people are coming to you and saying, I'm struggling, don't minimize this. We want to offer grace and be like, we all fall short of the glory of God and we all struggle. But minimizing pornography has been a sly way that has created a normalization, and it's creating everyone to be sick. There's some sickness in the water, and it's the hole in the boat. We keep going, I want a better marriage. I want to feel closer to you. I want a better sex life. And we're not dealing with the elephant in the room. Like, we've got to address that pornography is creating, it's taking the nourishment and sending it out to the sewer. So
Yeah. I mean, sex from a biblical worldview, this is something that is a beautiful thing. And we think about God designing the gift of sex to be experienced between a husband and a wife. And those guardrails are there so that we can experience all that he provided for us in that space. Now, if you're single, we're not minimizing the significance of and the beauty of being single as well. And what the journey towards understanding sexual wholeness as a single person is an important journey to take. But this is something that also I hear a lot. And we talk openly about this, and we ask our clients in relationship and in the work that they are wanting to do about what they're experiencing apart from their significant other, right? So things like masturbation and other things that sex isn't designed to be outside of relationship with your significant other. And so when you're taking care of yourself through masturbation, for example, you are really isolated. You're not experiencing what God is designed for relationship and what sex is designed to do, to connect with your significant other, your spouse, in that way. And so you can be addicted to masturbating, and it's just one and the same. You're taking care and trying to meet your need in a way that's outside of how really God's design and plan. And is that going to be satisfying? Is it going to be sustaining? No, it's the same thing as the same feeling that people would have as it relates to being addicted to pornography. And sometimes both of those things are happening at the same time, of course. So
exactly.
What is the need? How are we meeting the need? And if we pull back and integrate if you are a Christian, integrate your theology, what you believe to be true, what God has said about himself and what God has said about you, into your reality, into your real life, and think prayerfully and consider and get educated what's going on, and tap into that heart that you have to want to live in a right relationship with God and with others. Take that heart and do some things that you haven't done already in relationship with God and with others. And that is a big part of the remedy, so that you start meeting those needs in healthier ways.
Yeah. Which is what we're all trying to do, right? Is learn to meet our God-given healthy needs in healthy ways. We're trying to teach our kids to do that too. And so let's finish with just how to maybe talk about this more with our kids. And it isn't just a guy issue. So I would say this is what we do in Courageous Girls, the curriculum that I wrote over the last many years to have moms walk with their daughters at every age and stage of their growing years. We talk about these things. We're trying to talk about the root needs. How do you meet your needs in healthy ways? Because everybody is drawn to do this, to just, naturally go to unhealthy coping strategies. And when we start to go, this is really, the aftertaste of this feels gross. I mean, maybe for a while it feels good and you feel at peace about what you're doing. But eventually that catches up. Yeah. And so you won't have erectile dysfunction right away. Your marriage might not unravel right away, but eventually that little residue of gunk that gets into the water eventually starts to muddy everything. And so pornography is something you want to really address and not address it when you see it as a problem, but early on having conversations with our kids, both girls and boys, about the reality that we live in a world where, sexuality is glorified. It's actually put on an idol. It's made bigger than God. It's made bigger than ourselves sometimes. And we really want to be thoughtful about how we talk about that. So Courageous Girls is a great curriculum, mycourageousgirls.com, if you have raising daughters. There's quite a bit of stuff out there for boys. I will try to have some of that information in the show notes to say, here's some resources. There's not an exact
when you're thinking about little kids, I think about the book Good Pictures, Bad Pictures.
Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Yeah, it's a great. That's a great little kids book
for a starter, right? For little ones, and as you go in Courageous Girls, at age appropriate for the teens. Anything else that's coming to mind?
We're just talking all the time about what is our bodies meant for and how valuable they are, and this idea of not normalizing that we want people to be drawn to our bodies. First, we want to be seen as whole beings. You have a brain and you're smart and you have a fun personality, and we're always trying to point those out, and you have a beautiful body. So we're not trying to body shame. I know people are really concerned about that right now, but when you speak life and truth to your kids about all their parts, using language, appropriate language, not avoiding it, not doing the close your eyes kind of thing, but being able to say, hey, we're going to pause and not look at that and participate because it doesn't honor those people. It's really about not participating in things that are dishonoring and objectifying ourselves or other people. And so that's kind of the language that you can use and just be talking about all the time. You pass by a billboard and we're like, oh, there's a little bit of pornography up there.
Opportunity.
Use the conversation to be like, why do you think that's up there? And having good conversations.
Okay, so I hear you we're giving some good groundwork about the idea of starting this as early, so from a preventative end. But what to the parent that's like, I got a teenager and they're struggling with pornography right now, and we've never really talked about sex. I have some grief about that. I'm seeing that I maybe made some mistakes in that. How do I enter and engage in a conversation right now with my teen who doesn't want to talk to me about this, who is totally buried in shame about it, who is in, how do I help? How do I start?
Great question, Jeff. I'm going to just model the conversation, and I would be just as nervous. So I just want to, even though I talk about it all the time, if it's my own kid, it just hits at a deeper level and it's just hard. So validate that this is not something that's going to be easy. And you are asking God for help as you go in, but you want to be the one who leads. You're not waiting for your kid to come to you, because they're not going to until it gets really bad and they really need help. But try to beat it to the punch and just sit on their bed, catch them at night. 13, they do better at night. So catch them at night and just say, hey, I've noticed a few things that we need to talk about. And maybe, because you've seen some things on their phone, or you've run into some things on the computer, or you've watched some things you just noticed. You might even be noticing some symptoms of irritability. They're not sleeping a lot. But just say, I'm noticing, and mirror back what you're noticing. Just saying, talk to me about this. And then if they are still dancing around it, just be direct and ask, are you looking at pornography? Is that something that you're needing help with? Your tone is everything. Okay. Your posture of, tell me more. I'm here to help you. And then you're really trying to see kind of the reality of the posture of where your child is at. And in most cases, I would ask you to get someone else on the team and probably see if they're open to going to counseling. If they're not, then start with maybe another safe person outside of you. So maybe it's a youth pastor, maybe it's a mentor, maybe it's the other spouse, dad, maybe it's an uncle who you really trust. But you needing to get somebody else to say, can we start talking about what is it that you're struggling with here, and we get you some help. Once you've gotten to a place where there's an openness for help, then you're going to start talking about systems in the home that you need to set up to protect that behavioral modifications that kind of set us up more for success. It's not going to prevent the problem long-term if you haven't gotten to the roots, but you want to help your son or daughter with success. You don't want to be like, oh, they're going to be fine. You need to, again, set up the parameters and get real about what do we need to start thinking about with our phones, putting our phones away early, making sure that there's filters, and having that as a conversation, not a punishment. That's really key for teens.
Or lecture, which is hard for all of us. I can raise my hand. It's like, it's hard not to lecture, right? And so
good point.
I'm hearing you say that it's about turning towards. Good
summary.
And how is trust developed? Trust is developed with consistency over time. So if you haven't turned towards them about this issue, turning towards them and speaking life about them, like, I care about you, you're valuable, and even owning certain things in front of them to say, you know what, I didn't do a good enough job talking about this early enough, but it's so important, and I want to get better at it now, if you will allow me to walk with you in this. I'm your dad, I'm your mom, and I'm here. And having that consistent messaging creates a new environment where maybe that will open a door with them when they realize that they're stuck and they need help, and that you actually are there. Because again, pornography drives us away from relationships into secrecy and hiding. And this is the direct antidote. And you, as God's chosen parent for that child, whether they're a kiddo or a teen or a young adult, your voice is so significant in their lives. You can start having greater influence right now, even if you feel like you blew it earlier. Just begin this process of earning trust, consistency over time, and get the help that you need as well. But sometimes it's that credibility and acknowledging that you haven't done a good enough job on this, and you want to get better, and you don't want to make things worse. But they're valuable enough that we're going to be having these conversations because I care about you. I love you. And you're still my son or my daughter.
And you might have done everything right, and they're still a human being with their own story and
choices,
their own will. So
that's right.
That's the other piece is like, we can do all we want as parents, and our children just have their own stories, and you're being invited to walk with and to give them an experience of how do you do healthy coping. You invite others in. Our definition of integrity is bringing all of who you are, your mind, your heart, your body, and your soul before God and others.
Your relationships,
being honest about it wherever you're at. And that is a scary thing. But often, we want only what people can see. And we try to, present that to the world as who we are. But we're trying to bring all of ourselves. And this isn't a place you arrive. It's an ongoing kind of piece. So pornography is just one of those pulls towards pulling us away from real relationship. And I'm doing this because this is where I get to practice with my husband, with friendships, and even with our kiddos, Our kids are needing real relationship with us and with other adults in their life, safe adults. And bring counselors onto the team. That's what we're here for. Definitely want to make sure if you are a follower of Jesus, you do want a Christian counselor when it comes to dealing with pornography, because the worldview around pornography is not the same.
Yeah.
However, most trauma-informed, healthy counselors are not going to endorse pornography because they understand the statistics and the research around it. So I just want to say that as well.
Yeah, whether Christian or secular.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it.
Okay, Mattson, we're going to end this, land the plane with, come back to, you started with your story and your own introduction to pornography. Why don't you end with a word of encouragement and how do you live a life without it? I know we talked about a little bit of the pacing there, but at the end of the day, what motivates you to not want to engage here?
Yeah. I mean, and it wasn't necessarily just a light switch kind of moment. This is a journey of really deepening. What do I believe? Why am I doing what I'm doing, and thinking through and understanding and what is my core beliefs as from a theological perspective, right? Which I felt like I had pretty sound foundation for. But then how am I living and how am I integrating that? Is there a gap, what we talk about, between that or not? And as I understood that more, and I thought, okay, how do I close that gap, live more congruently? Is it possible to do that more and more and more and more? And I started equipping myself with the resources that I needed and learning. But the motivation comes out of my faith. And it was, I want to be right here vertically, and I want to be right in relationship with others. I want to be as healthy as I can. And I'm still on that pursuit to be as healthy as I can. And healthy people get help when they need it, right? So stay encouraged. If you are struggling, or if you know someone that's struggling, don't single this out as the greatest issue in the world. There's all kinds of struggles that humans are dealing with. And don't minimize it, but look forward, look at it, turn towards the people and the resources that you need to turn towards, and find the antidote and the healing in that journey. And it's worth it. It's so worth it, right? The goal is to use others less to get our needs met in unhealthy ways, right? Let's do that less and less, using others to get our needs met in unhealthy ways, and let's get our needs met in healthier ways, right? More and more and more.
Well said. And in the end, it creates more trust in all your relationships, more authenticity. And I heard it said really well from a sex addict recovering, probably been sober maybe 10 years, but he said he felt like an empty bullet shell when he was using pornography. And now he feels like his life is infused with the power that a bullet shell is supposed to have. But before, he would just, anywhere he was trying to invest, it just felt empty. And so that sense of saying it's possible to have a life that feels full and meaningful, and the reality of our relationships can be good and life-giving instead of always going for fantasy. And so that speaks to all of us, whether we struggle with pornography or just wanting something we don't have.
Make reality your friend, and be a person that's committed to health and help and getting and becoming more whole. That's a journey. All right. And we do it together.
Okay. So check out livingwholehearted.com if you want to continue being a part of our greater community, shrinking our integrity gaps and bringing together what we preach and how we live. And we definitely have an amazing clinical team that is ready to come alongside you if you're needing more resources here. Until the next time, continue to grow and become the leader that you would follow.
Well, did you know that we're not just podcasters? One of the best ways to connect with Terra and I and our whole team at Living Wholehearted is our website, livingwholehearted.com. There you're going to find the books that we've written, our e-courses, executive coaching, organizational development, and professional counseling services. And then one of our favorite things that we're up to these days, our Wholehearted Leadership Cohorts, where we take groups of leaders for 1 to 2 year journeys together. It's amazing. While you're there, for fresh content, make sure that you sign up for our e-newsletter. That's where we're putting out stuff every month that you want to keep close with. So visit livingwholehearted.com.
You can also join us on socials at living_wholehearted on Instagram, and we are Living Wholehearted on Facebook. You can also follow me at Terra Mattson on Instagram. We love to engage with you personally there, so make sure you reach out. Leave us a review if you're enjoying this podcast.
Hey, thank you for caring about being the kind of person and leader that lives with integrity.